Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're tuning in, you've probably just looked over your kid's shoulder at a math worksheet and felt that familiar knot of stress right in your stomach. Seeing your child struggle, watching your confidence take a nosedive over a surprisingly low test score, it's gut-wrenching. I know. I spent years as a middle school math teacher sitting across from parents who were worried, frustrated, and honestly just desperately wanting to do the right thing for their kid. And the very first thing you wonder is, do I need to hire a tutor right now? Well, let's take a deep breath. Today, we're going to look at what the research actually tells us about why kids struggle in math, and I'll give you a super simple framework to figure out exactly what your child needs. So let's get into it.
So, does a bad grade mean it's time to hit the panic button and hire a tutor? It is literally the most common question I get at parent-teacher conferences. And the short answer? Not always. A single low grade isn't a crisis. Sometimes it's just a bad week, a tricky unit, or maybe they just completely misunderstood the assignment. But other times, it's a symptom of something much deeper. To tell the difference, we really have to understand why learning math is so different from learning pretty much any other subject in school.
Which brings us to what we call the math iceberg problem. Think of math like a staircase. It's a cumulative climb. It builds on itself, step by step. A really great report from New Classrooms explains that engaging with grade-level math completely relies on a deep understanding of the concepts they learned in previous years. So when kids miss key steps along the way, these hidden learning gaps start piling up right below the surface. So say your 7th grader is failing pre-algebra today. It might not actually be because 7th grade math is too hard for them. It could very well be an unlearned, completely unseen 4th grade fraction skill that's finally causing the whole structure to wobble. Because of this iceberg effect, we kind of have to play detective. So here are the 5 signs to look for to figure out the root cause of your child's math struggles. First up, we have to figure out, is this a temporary low grade or a foundational skill gap? A temporary hurdle is just a blip. It's an isolated bombed test, no big deal. But a foundational skill gap is a persistent, ongoing struggle. Studies on math interventions actually emphasize that students who don't master early prerequisites, like our good old friend fractions, just won't have the background knowledge to handle middle school math. So if your kid is getting stuck on the exact same types of basic calculations week after week, that's not just a bad grade. That's a foundational gap that might need some targeted help. Now, this is super fascinating. Sometimes the problem isn't the math at all. It's the approach. Research actually shows that a student's study habits are the biggest predictor of their math achievement. So look out for a lack of consistent effort, poor time management, low concentration, or just an outright refusal to sit down and practice. You literally cannot learn math without picking up a pencil and doing the work. But the good news here? These are behavioral hurdles. They are highly solvable with just a bit of structure and routine at home long before you ever need to think about paying for a private tutor. But what if they are trying and they just completely freeze up? That brings us to sign number 3, math anxiety. Educational researchers define this as a genuine state of panic, fear, trembling, and mental distraction when faced with math problems. And neurological studies are wild on this. They show that math anxiety literally spikes activity in the brain's threat detection centers and plummets activity in the areas used for logical reasoning. It literally drains their working memory. It's incredibly common, but here's the massive takeaway. It is an emotional barrier. It is absolutely not a flaw in their character or a lack of intelligence. The final sign is a persistent need for individualized support. Schools use a framework called multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS. Tier 1 is just your standard classroom instruction, but when those foundational gaps get too wide, say you have an 8th grader who's actually performing at a 4th grade level, standard Tier 1 just isn't going to cut it anymore. They need Tier 2 or Tier 3 interventions. That means structured, intensive, individualized support to literally rebuild those missing steps on the staircase. Okay, but before we rush out to get that support, we need to address something a little sensitive: the parent anxiety trap. I really want you to hear this quote from a landmark study by Maloney and colleagues. When parents are more math anxious, their children learn significantly less math, but only if math anxious parents report providing frequent help with math homework. Wow, let that sink in for a second. If you absolutely despise math, if it makes your blood pressure spike, and you're sitting there at the kitchen table every night trying to help, you might actually be passing that anxiety right onto them and hindering their learning. So here's your permission slip. If math stresses you out, stepping back from homework help is actually a scientifically backed, fantastic parenting choice. You have full permission to stop fighting over algebra at 8 p.m. So if you're stepping back, who steps in? It's time to partner with the teacher. They are your absolute best first line of defense. Before you even think about hiring a tutor, here is your pre-tutor action plan. Step 1, check the syllabus. Are there just some misunderstood expectations happening? Step 2, call or email the classroom teacher. Research consistently shows that parent-teacher communication significantly boosts math scores. Tell them what you're seeing at home. Are they spending 3 hours on a 20-minute worksheet? The teacher needs to know that. And step 3, assess those at-home study habits we talked about earlier. You want to build this family engagement framework before you spend a dime. Building that relationship with the teacher does wonders for your child, too. A recent study found that a strong student-teacher alliance actually acts as a buffer against moderate math anxiety. When kids feel like their teacher is a secure base, they're way more willing to tackle scary math problems instead of just avoiding them altogether. And your collaboration with the teacher, that helps build that exact secure base. Now, let's say you've done all of this. You've checked the habits, talked to the teacher, but the gaps are just too deep. Now we look at what effective tutoring actually needs to look like.
If you're going to invest your hard-earned time and money into a tutor or a program, you need to listen to the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. They explicitly state that effective interventions must rely on diagnostic assessments. A good tutor doesn't just sit down and say, "Hey, what's for homework tonight?" No way. They assess your child to figure out exactly which specific steps on that math staircase are completely missing.
So if you are hiring someone, make sure their tutoring includes these 4 things. 1, diagnostic assessments to pinpoint the exact gap. 2, a dual focus on both the concepts, the why, and the procedures, the how. 3, it has to connect their current struggles back to that earlier foundational math. And 4, the ultimate goal of any good tutor should be to make themselves totally obsolete by building your kids' independent strategies. If a tutor is basically just doing the homework for them so they pass a quiz on Friday, they aren't fixing the iceberg. They're just polishing the tip.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground in this explainer today. Let's boil it all down into your personal math support checklist. Honestly, I invite you to just pause right now and screenshot this slide to keep it handy. Ask yourself these questions calmly and try to take the emotion out of it. Is this a persistent struggle or just a bad test? Are their study habits actually solid? Are they showing real signs of panic and anxiety? Have you partnered with a teacher yet? And finally, if you do hire a tutor, are they diagnosing the root cause? Running through this checklist is going to save you time, money, and a whole lot of unnecessary stress.
You are entirely capable of supporting your child through this without panicking. So I'm going to leave you with this. What is your child's next step on the math staircase today? Because figuring out that one single step, that is the key to unlocking their entire mathematical future. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. And hey, just keep taking it one step at a time.